And we find out today that Caitlin Clark had another injury nearly 2 weeks ago, 13 days ago, in fact. I saw this and I was floored. And I've tried to take a step back and not do the Indiana Fever is complacent and complicit, and they're trying to hide something.
A significant controversy has emerged regarding the Indiana Fever's handling of Caitlin Clark's injury information, with revelations surfacing about an undisclosed ankle problem that occurred nearly 2 weeks prior to public knowledge. The timing of this disclosure has raised serious questions about organizational transparency. Fans had been anticipating Clark's return for approximately 2 weeks, purchasing tickets at premium prices based on expectations that may have been built on incomplete information. The revelation that she sustained an additional injury 13 days earlier has created widespread frustration among supporters. According to sources, Clark suffered what was described as a very mild bone bruise in her left ankle on August 7th.
And blah, 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 blah. All bets are off now. All bets are off now. It looks shady. Now it looks shady. How does it look shady? Look, we thought she'd be back at practice this week. This whole week they've had to get her ready to come back and play. It's Wednesday. They got a game Friday night. We find out today she ain't practicing. And now
this information only became public on August 20th, creating a substantial gap between the incident and disclosure. The organization maintains that this ankle issue doesn't impact her recovery timeline from the groin injury that has kept her sidelined. However, this explanation appears contradictory to many observers. If Clark was expected to begin running and conditioning activities to prepare for her return, an ankle injury would logically affect her ability to complete these necessary preparations. The claim that it wouldn't impact her timeline seems questionable given the physical demands of basketball rehabilitation.
She ain't practicing. And now there's another injury that supposedly hasn't affected the timeline of her returning, which I think is bullshit. That's nonsensical. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't compute. If it kept her from being able to run and stuff, of course it set her back. And the Fever have known about it for 13 days. This is the first time I'm hearing anything about an ankle. Sources confirmed to me that Caitlin Clark suffered a very, quote,
the situation becomes more concerning when examining the team's communication patterns. Wednesday marked a critical point in the timeline, with a Friday game approaching and expectations that Clark would return to practice. Instead, news emerged that she wasn't practicing, accompanied by the belated revelation of the ankle problem. Coach Stephanie White's responses to media inquiries about Clark's status have drawn criticism for their apparent dismissiveness. When asked about updates regarding Clark's return, White responded tersely, stating that until reporters see Clark in practice, the situation remains unchanged.
About an ankle. Sources confirmed to me that Caitlin Clark suffered a very, quote, very mild bone bruise in her left ankle on August 7th. It's the 20th. Per Scott Agnes. Sources also stressed that this tweak does not affect her return timeline. She would still be out rehabbing her groin. Well, if she was supposed to be running to get her conditioning up and she tweaked her ankle, yeah, it's...
This response was perceived as carrying an attitude of irritation toward legitimate questions about the league's most prominent player. The coach's apparent frustration with injury-related questions seems misplaced given Clark's extraordinary popularity and the legitimate interest from fans and media. Clark's fanbase demonstrates loyalty levels comparable to major entertainment figures, seeking any available updates about their favorite player's condition and return timeline. The delayed disclosure raises questions about the league's injury reporting standards, particularly given the involvement of gambling and fantasy sports. Other leagues face scrutiny for failing to properly disclose player conditions that could affect betting outcomes and fan decisions regarding ticket purchases.
Yeah, it's going to affect her time. I mean, that doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand that. And I'm going to tell you something else that bothered me. Stephanie White today, I guess, was asked about Caitlin Clark's return again. And I don't like this answer because the answer is laced with attitude. All right. It's the answer oozes. I'm sick of answering questions.
Some fans who purchased expensive tickets based on expectations of Clark's return may have grounds for complaints, having spent money while the organization possessed material information about additional complications to her recovery. The financial implications of withholding such information could prove problematic for the franchise. Teammate Sophie Cunningham has found herself in an awkward position, frequently fielding questions about Clark's status without having definitive answers. She describes the situation as genuinely day-to-day, expressing sympathy for Clark's ongoing challenges while acknowledging the uncertainty surrounding her return. Cunningham emphasized the elevated standards in today's league, noting that players cannot simply return at partial fitness levels.
Questions about Caitlin Clark's injury. Oh, well, excuse us for asking. Yeah, to quote Samuel L. Jackson as Jules in Pulp Fiction, I'm sorry, did I break your concentration? Say what again? Say what? One more mother. I mean, seriously, are you kidding me, Stephanie White? Well, I'm sorry if you feel we're taking your time up.
The competitive environment requires complete readiness, making the rehabilitation process more complex than in previous eras. However, this explanation doesn't address why the ankle injury wasn't disclosed earlier. The handling of Clark's previous injury created confusion as well, with the organization initially suggesting she wouldn't return, only to have her play the following day. These inconsistent communication patterns contribute to speculation and conspiracy theories among fans who feel deliberately misled. The financial stakes surrounding Clark's presence have reached unprecedented levels for women's basketball.
Well, I'm sorry if you feel we're taking your time up. Why don't you resign and go see if you can ruin another college team, another college program? I mean, this is crazy. When asked if there's an update on Caitlin Clark, Stephanie White said, quote, "Until she gets into practice, until you guys see her in practice, it's really status quo. Same."
Ticket sales, merchandise, and general interest have created an economic environment the league wasn't prepared to handle. The organization's apparent failure to recognize these dynamics reflects poorly on their understanding of Clark's impact. Industry observers note that both the league and the Indiana Fever were unprepared for the phenomenon Clark represents. Despite having months to adjust their approaches, they continue to handle situations in ways that suggest they don't fully grasp the magnitude of public interest. Clark herself appears to understand her role and responsibilities to fans, continuing to make appearances at games despite her injuries.
Same as we have been. That is, you know what that's saying? Let me peel back the curtain. Did you see her out here? Why are you asking? Well, you've got the most popular basketball player in the world, men's or women's, I think, right now, as far as I'm concerned, that's got a rabid fan base that is more loyal to Caitlin Clark than they are the Indiana Fever or the WNBA.
Her visible efforts to connect with supporters who have invested heavily in seeing her play contrast sharply with what many perceive as organizational indifference. The contrast between Clark's apparent awareness of fan investment and the organization's handling of information creates an unfavorable impression. It appears that the player cares more about supporter experience than the franchise that employs her, a dynamic that could prove damaging long-term. This situation highlights broader organizational challenges within the league. Professional sports organizations at lower levels often demonstrate more competent handling of similar situations, raising questions about leadership and management capabilities at the highest level of women's basketball.
One reporter saying yes, another reporter is saying no. Bottom line is, we need to know a little bit more. We don't need Caitlin Clark's in-depth medical report, but it's fair for fans to wonder if the Fever and the league's biggest star is going to return to the floor this season or what the chances are. And she's been out of action for 5 weeks, so it's not as if some patience hasn't been expressed. So those conflicting reports that I'm talking to you about, they come from Scott Agnes and Chloe Peterson. Look,
The controversy extends beyond simple communication failures, touching on issues of trust, financial responsibility, and respect for the fan base that has driven unprecedented interest in the sport. Resolution will require significant changes in how the organization approaches transparency and fan relations. The ongoing situation serves as a case study in how not to manage the career and public image of a transformative athlete. The lessons learned from this controversy could influence how future superstars are handled across all levels of professional sports. The situation surrounding Caitlin Clark's injury status has become increasingly complicated, with mounting uncertainty replacing what initially appeared to be clearer expectations regarding her comeback timeline.
Look, anybody who saw this could have maybe thought something was up. Brianne January stepping on Caitlin Clark here, August 9th. Left ankle. That's where the bone bruise supposedly happened on August 7th, which is what is being shared now. And, you know, some of these things you hear rumblings.
Rather than gaining additional information, conflicting reports have emerged that
some of these things you hear rumblings about, and you don't know exactly what's going on. But again, the biggest shift that I've felt is the thought process and optimism of Clark being back on the floor versus, well, let's wait and, I don't know, maybe, hope so. That's a shift in tone, delivery, messaging, all these things, tea leaf reading, however you want to put it. And then again, there is also
this shift from apparent certainty to ambiguity has created confusion among observers and fans. Earlier signals, including teammate Natasha Howard's comments suggesting Clark would return shortly, have given way to more cautious wait-and-see messaging from team officials. Complications have emerged regarding additional injury concerns during Clark's rehabilitation period. Reports indicate she sustained a minor ankle problem while recovering from her primary injury.
And then again, there is also, what was publicly shared by reporters now at this point in time and put into the universe to get people a little bit riled up and further the discussion in a sense. Because Scott Agness has this on his timeline. Feel free to spend dollars how you like. I have a business to run, but you then cannot complain about new reporting and details. This is somebody who wasn't paying to access the article. But he does says, and yes.
However, conflicting accounts exist about whether this secondary issue has affected her return schedule. Two reporters have provided contradictory information about the ankle situation. Scott Agness reported that the injury has impacted her availability, while Chloe Peterson's sources indicated that although Clark suffered a mild bone bruise in her left ankle on August 7th, this setback would not alter her recovery timeline since she would continue rehabilitation for her groin injury regardless. The ankle incident occurred during a game on August 9th when Breanna Stewart stepped on Clark's left foot, though the bone bruise allegedly happened 2 days earlier on August 7th.
But he does says, and yes, the injury has impacted her availability. While Chloe Peterson says, sources confirmed to me that Caitlin Clark suffered a very mild bone bruise in her left ankle on August 7th, Scott Agness first. Source also stresses that this tweaked ankle does not affect her return timeline. Son's ankle injury, she would still be out rehabbing her groin. Don't buy that the ankle injury, if it hindered her at all, didn't affect her return timeline. I don't buy that to me, because
these timeline discrepancies add to the overall confusion surrounding her condition. The credibility of claims that the ankle injury hasn't affected her return timeline faces scrutiny given the noticeable change in tone from team officials. The shift from optimistic projections to cautious uncertainty suggests the situation has become more complex than initially understood. Clark's rehabilitation process was described as deliberately paced, focusing on gradually building her strength and conditioning.
To me, because of, again, the shift in the tone that I felt and heard. And secondly, about the deliberate pace that they're trying to build Caitlin Clark back up to, right? The deliberate pace. And then all of a sudden, this happens when you're trying to rebuild her block by block, step by step, day to day. I mean, Caitlin Clark was.
Any disruption to this careful progression, even from a minor injury, would logically create setbacks in the overall timeline. The team had listed Clark as questionable for a game against the Liberty following her MRI results, indicating ongoing uncertainty about her status. Recent statements from coach Stephanie White reflect this cautious approach. When asked about Clark's potential return by the regular season's end, White responded that returning remained the hope, but offered no concrete timeline.
Day to day? I mean, Caitlin Clark was listed as questionable the game for the Liberty after the MRI. So you do wonder, okay, what happened then? You don't want to put extra pressure on her, but the pressure is now being ramped up by the mystery. And, if it was day by day, protecting her, making sure you're rehabbing, making sure you're deliberate, making sure you're ramping her up, building her back up, anything that takes that off course is a setback. Even if it
During subsequent media availability, White provided no new updates, maintaining that the situation remained status quo until Clark could participate in practice. Sophie Cunningham addressed Clark's situation during her podcast appearance, acknowledging widespread curiosity about the timeline. Cunningham emphasized that even Clark herself lacks certainty about her return date, describing it as a genuinely day-to-day evaluation process. Cunningham explained that while Clark might be capable of playing at lower competitive levels, the WNBA's elite standard requires peak physical condition.
anything that takes that off course is a setback, even if it's a very mild injury. I mean, part of the problem with Caitlin Clark's season is the myriad of injuries she's suffered. And this is what's been said about her lately. Stephanie White on Sunday regarding Caitlin Clark.
Do you anticipate she'll be back by the end of the regular season? Or?
I mean, that's the hope. The hope is that she's back.
That's the hope. The hope is that she's back. Then there's Stephanie White.
The league's current depth and talent level demands that returning players perform at their highest capacity rather than simply being healthy enough to participate. External speculation has suggested various theories about Clark's extended absence, including suggestions that she might be taking mental health breaks from league pressures. Cunningham dismissed such theories, explaining that elite athletes typically struggle most when unable to compete rather than when facing on-court challenges. The extended absence has reached 5 weeks, leading to reasonable questions about Clark's availability for the remainder of the regular season and potential playoff participation.